Hi, I'm Brian and I'm here today to introduce you to sheet metal. So welcome to the shop, come on in. A lot of people don't realize what a sheet metal worker does. We're one of those trades, we're not as big as maybe a carpenter or a plumber where most people have an understanding of what we do. In a general sense, we build anything out of metal. And what we do is take something two-dimensional or a flat piece of metal and we transform it into something three-dimensional. And there's a huge array of different projects or products that we'll build with all those in mind. So I've put a few out on the table here as examples. One of our biggest areas that a sheet metal worker will work in is known as heating, ventilation, and air conditioning industry. So if we looked up at the ceiling and saw all the pipes and ductwork up above here, that's about 60% of what sheet metal workers do. And we design, build, install, and maintain those systems. So a couple examples of fittings that we'll make. Something like that, a rain cap. Or this one is called a squared around. Different shapes, but they all start the same way, as a flat piece of metal. Another large area that sheet metal workers work in is known as the custom area of sheet metal. And for that, we'd look at something like this, maybe a stainless steel barbecue. So they're usually one-off products. Go to a custom shop, it could be aluminum, it could be stainless steel. And again, it starts off two-dimensional, just a flat piece of metal, and then we create the shapes and patterns we need to make it into a three-dimensional shape. Another area we work in is aircraft. So all planes are made of metal, typically aluminum, and sheet metal workers will, again, build the components to create an aircraft. At the college, we offer different levels of training in sheet metal. We have a foundation program that's sheet metal and metal fabrication. And the difference between sheet metal and metal fabrication is the thickness of metal that we work with. So a metal fabricator will work with heavier plate material, where a sheet metal worker works with the lighter gauge materials. Structural components will be in metal fabrication and not usually part of sheet metal work. We also do all levels of apprentice training, levels 1 to 4, and sheet metal is also a red seal trade along with metal fabrication. So let's have a walk through the shop and see some of the equipment we use. This here is a very common piece of equipment we use in the sheet metal shop. It's a handbrake, and what we do is clamp our material inside that handbrake, move the bending leaf here, and that bends our material. You can see we have about 6 or 8 different brakes in the shop, and they range in size. And the bigger they are, the heavier or thicker material they can bend. Over on the side of the shop here, this is our soldering station. So a lot of our components need to be sealed or waterproof. And so we'll do soldering here. And again, it's a little different than other trades where you solder, like a plumber. We don't use a torch, we use what's called a soldering iron. We'll heat this up till it'll melt the solder, place that on our project, and do the soldering that way. There's no flame that actually touches where we're doing our soldering. So we have a whole bench full of soldering stations here. We have multiple benches with smaller machines that all have a different purpose. So different processes for different machines. This one's a small bench here. All of these ones, we can put different wheels on them. So if we look at this one that's got a set on, and this wheel will do one operation and that's it. It's got a specific purpose and that's the only job it does. So each of these have their own set of wheels and their own purpose to do whatever function it is on a piece of metal. When we have to fasten sheet metal together, so make a joint in it, these machines are a couple options we have. This one's called a button punch, and it's really just a punch and die, and it dimples the 2 layers of material together. This one is called a spot welder, and same idea, the 2 tips come together and actually produce a weld instead of a dimple, and it holds that material together. Again, a bench of an assortment of different what are called stakes, and these are basically a backing so that we can hammer and hit and manipulate metal to shape it or form it the way we want to. One thing with our machinery as well, you can see that it looks fairly old, and a lot of the technologies haven't changed in a long time in sheet metal. So we still do a lot of things the way they did 100 or so years ago, and some of this machinery may be even 50 or 60 years old, and it's still used today, and it's still bought today. You can buy the same pieces of equipment. Our bench here is just full of stock material, and this is our shearing bench. So this is where we cut our metal. This is the first stage of anything we do with a piece of sheet metal, is cut it from sheet form into the size that we require for the job. And that's what these machines are here. So we'll stick it in, there's 2 knives, and it cuts the material. We also have a large one which is power operated instead of manual, off to the side here. Well, we're at this end of the shop. If we look up, we can see one of our former projects from a class, building an airplane. So we had mentioned aircraft is part of sheet metal work, and that was a aircraft specific class that built that airplane that we display now. At this end of the shop, we keep all our material that we stock regularly. We have some aluminum up top here. We have some galvanized steel in these racks. We have some pre-painted material, so it's a galvanized material, but it's got a color-coded paint on it. You get a huge array of different colors. We have some stainless steel at the bottom, and then we have some other aircraft materials, some aircraft aluminum off to the side here. We utilize installation methods with our shed here, and we do 2 components with this. We do residential installation, so we'll put the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning that you'd see in a home. We install that in our shed here, as well as what's called architectural sheet metal. And architectural sheet metal is the exterior components of a building that make it look nice and keep the weather out. And we'll do that. We'll do actual installations on our shed, inside and out. We're undercover, so we don't usually work out in the weather, but we will utilize the outdoors all year round for installation components. Included in our training in sheet metal is drafting. Drafting and what we refer to as layout. And layout is where we make the patterns that we go into the shop and form. So this is our drafting room. We do all of our classroom theory in here, but mostly we do our drafting. When we set out to do our drafting, and it's one of the nice components of sheet metal work, and it's one part that I always enjoyed. We take them from start to finish from the drafting room, make the patterns, take it into the shop, do all our forming, and create the project or object from that.